Hello, and welcome to the History Inquirer. This is where we inquire into the past to understand our present. Today, we will continue from where we left off last time with part 2 of the Southern Campaign, the Siege of Charleston. So sit back, grab a snack and a drink if you want, and let's get started. In December 1779, with Georgia firmly in British hands, General Henry Clinton prepared to launch a major offensive against Charleston, South Carolina. 90 troop transports, 14 warships, and 13,500 soldiers would leave New York City for Savannah, Georgia, to link up with British forces there, and then north to besiege Charleston. However, the voyage to Savannah, which should have taken 10 days, ended up taking 5 weeks due to bad weather. The British then had to march through an untamed wilderness of sand, marsh, and woodland to reach their objective. The reason for this was that the chosen routes had them land on Simmons, now Seabrook Island, and then move up the Ashley River and across to Charleston, beginning on February 11th to 12th. They were not marching along a road from Savannah to Charleston, especially since I-95 had not been built yet. And before I move on to the siege itself, there is one thing I would like to mention. In the previous year, John Lawrence, a former aide-de-camp to Washington, came to Charleston with the proposal to liberate up to 3,000 enslaved South Carolinians in return for service in the Continental Army. Early in 1779, as the Army's manpower crisis worsened, Congress suggested that white South Carolinians listen to Lawrence and enlist those slaves. Governor John Rutledge and his Privy Council would do almost anything to save Charlestown. They even wrote Prevost offering to pull South Carolina out of the rebel coalition, making it a neutral power, Switzerland with Spanish moss. Yet the rice planters had their limits. They would not free and arm a single slave. Now, Prevost was a British general who took over the command of British forces in Georgia and took him over from Archibald Campbell, who you may remember from last time. Now, John Lawrence would fight during the Siege of Charleston and be captured and later released in Philadelphia during a prisoner exchange. The Siege of Charleston would begin on April 1st, 1780. April Fool's Day. But it really would begin on April 1st with General Benjamin Lincoln, defending the city with around 5,500 Americans. General Washington would attempt to send reinforcements in the form of 700 Virginians. However, there would be too few to make a difference. Americans would erect fortifications to defend the city as best they could, and remnants can still be seen in Marion Square today. On April 8th, 1780, British warships entered Charleston Harbor, forcing their way past Fort Moultrie, which had repelled the British years earlier, thus isolating the city further from reinforcement, resupply, and escape routes. The bombardment of the city started April 13th after Americans refused the British offer of surrender. American and British forces will exchange cannon and small arms fire as the siege continued, with British lines drawing ever closer as a noose around the city tightened. At Monk's Corner on April 14th, a British force under Lieutenant Colonel Siege of Charleston, attacked and routed an American cavalry force under General Isaac Huger, which allowed the British access to the region east of the Cooper River. In time, the British would take Fort Moultrie, completely enveloping the city. In a war council, General Lincoln discussed options with his officers about the best course of action. The preservation of the army was a primary concern. They needed to escape either through fighting their way out or under a flag of truce. General Lincoln chose to surrender Charleston to the British on the condition that he and his army be allowed to leave the city. The British refused because they wanted his army out of commission, off the board. The British refused, Washington advised Lincoln to evacuate the city before it was too late. However, civil authorities demanded and persuaded him to stay, while many of them slipped away in secret. How nice for them. How nice for them. When General Lincoln asked the civilian leaders who stayed behind for permission to leave the city and save his army, they threatened to burn the boats needed to evacuate. He should have had more backbone and forced his way out regardless, but he did not. Nevertheless, starting on May 11th, the British began bombarding the city with huge shells, causing fires to break out throughout the city. Food supplies and ammunition were also running very low at this time. And it's because of this, the fires, the food supplies were low. Now, on May 12th, General Benjamin Lincoln surrendered the city unconditionally, with 89 of his men dead, 138 wounded, and 5,500 captured. This was the worst defeat the Americans would suffer during the entire war. Although the British succeeded in taking Charleston and an American army off the board, they did not have control over the entire state. They would still face resistance in the form of American militia under Francis Marion, the Swamp Fox, and prompted General Washington to send General Horatio Gates, the hero of Saratoga, south to rebuild the American army. This would lead to the Battle of Camden. Thank you all for watching. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps out the channel. Keep inquiring, and I'll see you all next time on the History Inquirer. Thank you.